Bring Sheikh Navaid back in here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sheikh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ibrahim, I liked you from before, but now I like you even more because we've spoken about money, we've spoken about the matrix, and you've given an analogy based on food. I think we're meant to be best friends, mashallah, tabarakallah.
The halal matrix. The halal
There
matrix.
we go. There we go.
I'm sure who is Neo. Ibrahim, Jazakallah khairan for that. We really appreciate it. Me and Sheikh Navaid had an opportunity to think of some questions to ask you based on your extensive experience of working, and more importantly, actually working in a different part of the world. I mean, we have Islamic finance in Canada. Alhamdulillah, we're trying our best here to make it happen. I know you guys are slightly ahead of us in UK, and the term I always see is 20 years. UK is 20 years ahead of Canada when it comes to Islam. I wanted to ask you again. I think we've kind of covered this as well, but many times in our community, right? We're familiar with the prohibition of riba, the avoidance of interest and stuff like that. But we somewhat struggle with the practical applications of those. Alhamdulillah, you mentioned Curacapital and all the amazing things they're doing behind the scenes. Are there anything that you've come across, 2 or 3 lesser known, but equally important considerations that Muslims should be looking at when it comes to making investment decisions? Even getting started is very, very tough. I see a lot of people just literally sitting in checking accounts with tremendous amount of money inside of it, not doing much with it.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we address the latter point first? The challenge about moving from no movement to actually, getting off the fence, and really the start choice. People think that I've not got off the fence because I've not made an investment decision yet. I just want to keep my money safe. But the reality is they've actually already made an investment choice. They've decided to allocate 100% of their wealth to cash, and they've they've put that money into a cash portfolio that isn't actually making them any money. In fact, I mean, the Royal Bank of Canada or all the other banks in Canada, I'm sure they're not. You can be sure that they're not doing this out of charity. They are a for-profit endeavor, and you can be sure that your money is making someone profit. It just isn't you. Moving and very, very stark way of seeing this is I was doing a portfolio analysis where if someone had 50,000 pounds, and they looked to invest over a period of I think 10 to 15 years, and they did nothing on one side, versus someone else who had the same portfolio and just invested in a basic bunch of stocks, very average bunch of stocks. On one side, they would have gone up. The one that invested would have gone up by 4x. So they would have made that 50,000 something like 200,000. The other person, because of inflation, but also zakat, over time, will actually have gone down to 10,000. And so, inaction is just inexcusable. And then I think the other, coming back to the first bit of your question, what are the other few things that people can and should be thinking about? I think, people should be thinking about the ESG aspect, ethical and social impact side of their investment, because we're investing in a halal way to do everything we do in our life should be about doing good, and I think investments and money is no different to that.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think I always say indecision is a decision with the consequences, right? And I often say that if you're not invested, you're losing. Not necessarily one is obligation, which is 2.5%, but at least 2.5 to 3% to inflation. So, at bare minimum, your money has to grow at 5 to 6% just to say that you have the same amount of money next year, right? And it's a very tough concept to get that to across to people. But I mean, good, bad, and different. What happened in the last 2-3 years now with inflation spiking up as much as it has, people realize what inflation is now. They physically felt inflation at 8%, versus before it was 1-2%. I don't feel it, but at 8 you do. Okay, now I have to do something about it. Inshallah, this is important because education is at the end of the day is what we can do from your side and my side, and at least allow our ummah to know that these options exist.
Ibrahim, I have a follow-up question for you, man. So you mentioned ESG. Now, traditionally speaking, when we look at AOFI standards and other standards for Sharia criterion, we're usually just looking at qualitative and quantitative screening. Is the business halal? Is the service halal? And then we're looking at, financial ratios. Something that's not looked at in these standards is the BDS movement, the boycott, sanction, and divestment. Number one, do you think that's something that's important to look at moving forward? And then number two, if you do feel it is important, how do we, generate that conversation now? How do we start that conversation that Muslims should be looking at these sort of things as they're thinking about Sharia compliant investing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the simple answer is yes, we absolutely should be. I think most of us, there was a chicken shop down the road that they held out for a long period of time with they had their Coke and their Pepsi, all of the other drinks on the boycott list. And I was pleased to note that about 9 to 12 months in, they've finally given way, and they had these non boycott drinks on the menu.
Oh, subhanallah.
So so I think boycotting definitely does work. I mean, Starbucks, they actually recently made, I don't know if you saw this,
I did,
$3
yeah, yeah.
million donation, which sounds very unlike Starbucks. Um, and I think it's because it does have an impact. So I think we need to do that. I think there are actually um, uh, some from memory, I want to say, companies like Kestrel possibly do have some kind of screen that allow for this sort of thing. But regardless, even if you don't, you can't find an app that does it, you should be working with investment firms that have, this aspect, rooted in exactly what they do. And I'm sure, certainly speak for Curate, this is something that we are very, very conscious of. And then the second is that if you are investing yourself, you should look for the kind of standard screens out there, and you should then make your own decision in terms of whether or not you want to exclude or include. It's I would say though that it's not a straightforward area because there are various different levels of how far one goes, because at one level, if you go to the absolute extreme, any country that is in any way kind of supporting or not politically aligned with our personal views on this subject, even by being in that country, technically you are paying tax. That's kind of a very extreme position. And so one has to be careful about where they land, and there's certain large companies that it's kind of that they may not necessarily be directly supporting what's happening in Israel Palestine right now, but then at the same time, it's it's very hard to actually boycott certain larger companies as well. Um, so it's not a straightforward one, but we definitely should have it in the forefront of our minds.
Jazakallah khair. And I wholeheartedly agree. At the very least, make the intentionality and then see how far you can go with it. Bidnillahi ta'ala. Okay, I'm going to follow up with a second question for you now. You have just been appointed CEO of Ibrahim Khan Financial, and you have to create a one stop ETF for all of the Muslims. Okay, so only one ETF. Talk to me about what are you putting inside of this ETF, and what are the different types of allocations that you would put in, inshallah.
Yeah, really interesting question. So am I just allowed to pick public stocks, or can I kind of mix
Yeah,
and match
it has
different?
to be public. It has to be, everything's public. Yeah.
Okay. So I would have a long-term mindset, and I'm naturally quite aggressive.
I like it.
So what I would probably do is I would have about half of them in what's called the Magnificent Seven. So the seven largest tech companies, people like Amazon and Microsoft and Nvidia, I think are there now as well, uh, Alphabet, Google, etc. The seven of those are the kind of, and those companies actually make up around, from memory, about 35% of the entire S&P 500,
Hmm.
and of the entire stock market globally, that then comprises about 17 or so percent. So, it's a very heavy allocation. Um, so I would do that. And then for the other half, my thesis would be how can I identify the future Magnificent Seven? Because
Mm.
if you look at a cycle of 10, 20 years, these companies were not the top seven companies. And in the next cycle, the next top seven companies, I believe many of those haven't actually, they're in the stock exchange, but they're not actually, there yet.
Mhm.
And so, if you had invested $1,000 in Apple in 1990, that would be worth $4 million today. And so it's kind of thinking, how can we identify Apple that many years ago? And so it's the thesis I would apply to the 50% is I would look for companies that have, and this is, by the way, I'll do a video on this properly as well at some point on the channel.
Inshallah.
Um, and uh, the thesis developed with our head of our investment committee, a guy who was one of the most successful traders on the city for about 15 or 20 years. And who's now retired and managing his own wealth. And so this is kind of something we've been working on together. And the idea is that you basically have the ETF model that you normally have, tracker ETF approach, where they're kind of tracking each company, and as it becomes larger, they kind of increase the allocation to it. So what we do instead is go right to the IPO companies, the new IPO companies. You go get rid of the ones that have, you need to at least be in the market for about 5 years. Let's get rid of the ones that just IPO'd and then died, and then find out those where they have significant early stage investors that invest in IPOs, like Bailey Gifford and others like that. And then from that, you pick those that the graphs and all of the technical analysis is correct. Basically, without going into huge amounts of detail, you come up with a portfolio of about 30 to 40 stocks that we think of, they'll be the magnificent seven of the future. And then each year you revisit it and you just tidy that up, add some in, subtract some more, double down on those that are kind of increasing, and then you just do that for the next 20 years. And
Love it.
voila, you've actually got yourself your magnificent seven, and then you can adjust those out into the other side of the portfolio.
I
Jazakallah
can
khair. That's
I
a
can
wonderful
I can
answer.
physically see the wheels are turning Ibrahim's head. You building his portfolio out. Let me tell you, one thing that's not going to be in there is quantum computers stocks.
Yeah,
They're a
they just
complete fail
crashed,
this week. They're a
absolutely
complete fail.
crashed this week. So, Ibrahim, let's follow up on this, man. Speak to me about cryptocurrency. Should Muslims be investing in that in your ETF? What are the cryptos you're looking at? And also on this, people are always looking to hedge against risk. Where do you stand on Sukuk? And what do you think our allocations on that should be?
Yeah, I think cryptocurrency is here to stay, and the very fact that you now have some of the largest fund managers globally who are taking positions in the space, and um, I think it gets to a point where if they're going to take a position and they need to then kind of build it up to 3, 4, 5%, that alone is going to be very significant, particularly for things like Bitcoin. So I'm pretty bullish on Bitcoin, and I suspect it's going to, especially with post-Trump, is going to rise quite significantly. I won't be very surprised if it goes past 200K in value as well over the next 24, well, at least 12 to 18 months. Um, Beyond that, it's a bit of it's a bit of a wild card in terms of what to go for. I would definitely go for some of the standard ones. Um, Companies like Solana. I'm just going to pull up some of the stuff that I have been looking at: XRP, Solana, Ethereum, of course. You could look at BNB, ADA, and the usual kind of suspects. I think having a portfolio of those, decent larger ones, will probably stand you in good stead. But I wouldn't expose it to any more than 5% of the portfolio.
That's fair. And your thoughts on Sukuk?
Sukuk. So I think that um, Sukuk are good. There's not enough of them, and they are very USD leaning. Um, within this particular, ETF, I don't know if I would have any because it's very much growth focused. But for certain types of, investment strategies and certain types of objectives, I definitely would be interested in, want to try and ideally buy them, where they kind of go down in value, where the yields go up, and try and aim for that kind of five, ideally 6 to 7, if we can get into that range. That would be ideal. So yeah, I'm kind of open to Sukuk. as someone who, we run our income funds, I personally just feel that you can just do much better by not going for Sukuk. You can just get these, 7.5, 8, 9% returns, property back, um, and you know they're semi-liquid, so 3 months notice. I just feel that, and it's not just us. There's other firms out there that offer some similar stuff like this. People like Nesta in the UK, and there's a few providers in the Middle East as well. I feel that that's, for me, just a more compelling option.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. You're looking to hedge against risk, you can still make profit at that time. You don't have to sacrifice profit for the sake of hedging against risk. So, great observation.
I want to add just a couple of things to the Sukuk conversation. Yeah, Sheikh, I'm going to get you to just explain what Sukuk is in a second, but just for the people on the call here, Sukuk is a fixed income instrument, which is halal. This is where you become in a traditional scenario, what happens when you want to buy something, you go to the bank, you borrow money, you pay the interest, and then you use that money to what you need to do with it. In a situation where Sukuk or a fixed income, you become the lender. You're the one that's lending money out, and you're collecting. If you have fixed income instruments, interest, and in case of Sukuk, profits. But fixed income instruments or Sukuks have inverse relationship when it comes to interest rates. So when interest rates are going up, they are going down. But when interest rates go down, Sukuks go up. The value of the bond itself kind of goes the opposite. So it's reverse relationship when it comes to prevailing interest rates. Sheikh, you want to take it there's actually a question here about fixed income. You want to explain what Sukuk is? Ibrahim, you can as well quickly.
Yeah, so basically, Sukuk essentially sells an investor group a certificate and then uses the proceeds to purchase an asset that the investor group has direct partial ownership interest in. And then over a long period of time or over a determined period of time, the issuer must also make a contractual promise to buy back the bond at a future date at par value. So basically, it's like a bond, but you're doing gymnastics to get around it.
Yeah. Last thing I'll mention with Sukuk as well is actually a new IOFI notification that came out, I think last week sometimes, where they're actually looking at all the Sukuks that have been issued and the structure of them. Actually, they have an issue with how they're structured. The underlying assets are not being properly managed, and they're not there. So the IOFI is looking at all the Sukuks around the world, and it's causing a bit of a trouble. Ibrahim, question for you, man. I want to talk about AI a little bit. So AI is coming. It's coming for all of us. Alhamdulillah, good way or in bad way. The world's taking advantage of it, and we are part of that. You already addressed the Bitcoin, the blockchain, and stuff like that, but I wanted to know your thoughts on Islamic finance, AI. Have you merged these two together by any chance? Have you thought about them and its impact on us going forward?
Yeah, so when we think about our mission at IFG about leveling up Muslims, the fastest way that one can do that is by jumping onto the next very inexorable tidal wave that moves things forward dramatically. And if you're in the right time at the right place, that can, significantly move your wealth forward very, very fast as well. And I would definitely say that AI is one of those trends. The genie is out of the bottle, and all of us are probably using AI now in some way, shape, or form. And this is very different to Bitcoin cryptocurrency, where you had the crypto bros selling us the dream, but I'm not actually sure that it's like, I think there's value to it, but it's not going to be so mass disruptive as something like AI was, or going to the cloud was before that, or B2B SaaS before that, or mobile phones, the iPhone before that, or the internet indeed before that. And so I think AI is very much something that we should be focused on. In terms of the ways that one get exposure to this, I'd say that there's actually multiple types of themes to this. The first and obvious theme is investing in early stage venture, where this is kind of the internet era, the late 1990s, early noughties, which is going to give birth to some really interesting future, possibly magnificent sevens. And this is actually going really early, even before it gets to the public stock market. And so investing in early stage tech, and we're doing that obviously through our fund, and investing in AI tech startups is vital. and diversifying your exposure there. The second area is, I think, investing in things like the Magnificent Seven and the tech, stocks generally, because that's kind of a nice way of getting some exposure to AI that's already up and running. And then the third area, I think it's less obvious, is things like real estate. So having a think about, the growth in data centers and the growth in the use of compute and electricity.
Power,
Uh, and there's a whole host of different investment, approaches that can be taken there around real estate and infrastructure that is actually going to be vital to deliver the level of compute that we need to see.
Alhamdulillah. Very well. But have you mixed the two together by chance when it comes to, I mean, the Islamic finance itself? I mean, would that make our lives a little bit easier to analyze some of these investments, to review them faster? I mean, there's a lot of implications of AI itself, like you mentioned, but I just don't know if it'll make. It definitely overlaps into Islamic finance somehow, some way. I just don't know if there's any trends you see between the two of them, the Deen and then the AI. And then, of course, we've seen all those videos. Now I'm actually freaked out. Everything I see online, I don't know if it's real or not, or is it actually subbed, and is this the actual Sheikh Navaid talking or somebody else talking? Is this you or not? It's a different world now for sure.
I mean, we've had some AI impersonations of myself, not
no way.
particularly good ones, but they are out there, and they'll be getting worse. I think AI is like any other technology, and it can be put to good uses, and it can be put to bad uses. And so I think from an Islamic perspective, unless you're actively investing in something that is like AI gambling, bot or something, I don't think there's actually too much of an issue with it. Where I think it is helpful for Islamic scholars to have a very close eye on it. I guess it's twofold. One is because it's just a new technology, and I think this is a systemic issue with Islamic scholarship at the moment, which is perennially underfunded, and there isn't much interaction with swift interaction with future trends. So what ends up happening is we're just now getting to the point where scholars are coming out with fatwas against Bitcoin. It's like you kind of finally caught up to where everyone else was like 5 years ago, and you've still you've kind of fundamentally kind of misunderstood what's going on and come down on the wrong side of the the conversation to the point that it's kind of irrelevant. And I think that it's for Islamic scholarship we also we need to have almost like a sandbox approach where with hygiene kind of and risk warnings, there should be almost like working fatwa, right, where it's like on the basis of this knowledge, this is kind of the judgment, so it kind of helps people move in a particular direction. So that's the first observation, and the second observation is that we are going to see the rise of AI muftis and fatwas, and I think that's it can be dangerous, but also it can be actually quite powerful, because if you codify the huge bank of Islamic literature out there, and you make that available at the the fingertips of folks. I think that there is power to it, but it has to be used, and it has to be designed in the right way. And I don't think you can ultimately get away with actually needing a human Islamic scholar. But anyway, these are my ruminations. Perhaps Sheikh Navaid, you might have as the actual scholar in the room, your own observation.
No, Jazakallah khair. I think there are astute observations, man, and I agree with you. A lot more research and a lot more effort needs to be put in discussing these issues, because I feel that as we get closer to the inevitable reality, we are going to be completely overwhelmed with the things that we're seeing. So may Allah help us and guide us. Ameen. Ibrahim, before we move on to the audience and get questions from them, last question for you from our side is with regards to retirement reality. The vast majority of Muslims are not prepared for retirement. They have little to no pensions in their name. Now, given current market conditions, what is like one strategy or a specific type of investment that you think that Muslims can get into now that would help them feel a little bit more secure as they approach retirement?
Yeah. So what I would be focused on would depend on how far you are from your retirement. So I would think about a few questions. I would think about, how far you are, how much you've already got in money, how much you will add to that in the coming years, and then based on that, and also crucially, how much do you actually need to retire on? So actually do the maths on that. Now, maybe the best way to think about this is by running through a live example. Um, so let's say you want to retire at the age of 65 and you're 50 now, and you've got £100,000 saved up, and you can probably add another £50,000. I use pounds, but you can use dollars instead, right? On top of that every single year. So over the next 15 years, you should be able to save up another 750,000 on top of the 100,000. So, just by cash alone, you should be roughly around 850. Um, and and let's say that you want to make an income of let's say 100K a year on retirement. So if we kind of think about the math on that, so 100K retirement income, let's assume that we want to earn 7%, per annum is I think relatively achievable um, uh, return. So if we kind of divide 100,000 by 7 and we times it by 100, that gives us about 1.4 million is the goal. So 850,000 is the cash that we basically have, and then we need to kind of increase this roughly by about 2x or 1.8x, which I think is actually pretty reasonable. So I think what I would be doing over this 15-year period is in the first 7 years be going about much more towards the growth end of the spectrum. And so I would probably have things like stocks, private equity, venture capital, property, and maybe a small rump of high yield fixed income in there. And then in the second half, this 8 years, 7.5, 8 years prior to retirement, I would slowly winnow away from things like the venture capital, maybe winnow down the private equity, winnow down the stocks, and gear up on the fixed income and real estate. So that by the time you get to 65, you're pretty much there where you've got about 1.5 million sat there, which is primarily in real estate and fixed income, which should be giving you about 7-ish%. Uh, and I think and then you might have a rump of it depending on how much you've got and what's going on into some growth as well, just to kind of keep the growth going for the next several years. Yeah, that's how I think about it.
So we started off on the same trajectory, but then you went drastically off. So I like the fact that you gave the example of someone that's 50 years old, someone that had 100,000 pounds saved up, but then all of a sudden from 50 to 65, he's saving 50,000 pounds every year. That's where I'm like, okay, we lost touch with reality for the vast majority of
No,
Muslims.
no. So this is the interesting thing, Sheikh. So actually, what happens at the age of 50 is that's when the kids move out, and that's when most
Mm.
people have paid off the mortgage. And so people feel really bad at the age of 50 where they're like, oh, I've only got like 100K, what am I going to do? But actually, what ends up happening is that last 15 years, your salary goes up as well, and all of these expenses have gone down. And so you actually do see quite an uptick.
Oh, I agree. But is it going to be 50,000 pounds worth if you've only
No,
done 100,000 until 50? Allah knows best.
yeah,
But I
maybe.
love the answer you gave. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, let's talk about the questions and stuff like that. I'll try to definitely bring them up on the on the screen here. And there are a lot of questions here, but let's see if I can answer this one here. You guys can pick. Sheikh, I'm going to move you up to the top there. I have seen many fatwas that say stocks that are less than 5% of a stock of prohibited product, then it is halal to invest. How does that work? These businesses are all involved in riba. So they're talking about the 5% rule. I think
Yeah.
IOFI rule. Whoever wants to answer that question quickly, if you don't mind, I can as well if you want me to.
Ibrahim, you, as our guest, would you like to take a stab at this?
Yeah, well, I mean, why not? So I think it's um, the basic punchline is that if you set a threshold that is too extreme, you're going to rule out all businesses because every business needs to have a bank account. And so the Islamic scholars, they want to set a threshold where so de minimis in terms of the overall profits that it is negligible in terms of the the value that it puts forward towards the actual growth of the business. And I think it's essentially that what we are relying on is the ijtihad of the Islamic scholars and their collective judgment on this, that's the number that they've put forward.
Jazakallah khair. And I think I'll chime in quickly over here. So what Ibrahim presented is the argument by necessity that Muslims should be growing their personal net worth so that they can support the causes of the ummah. And in order to increase their personal net worth, they have to be investing. But they won't have access to any investments if the threshold is not at 5% or higher than that. And number two, I also think we need to reframe the way we think fiqh. Fiqh is not black and white at all. The Prophet ﷺ, he talks about this concept of kullatan, which is a body of water that is so large that no matter how much impurity goes into it, it'll never impure the body of water, even if a person was to urinate in it, right? And that's how we need to understand fiqh, that there is a tolerance for the negligible. And this is what is happening. 5% would be considered very, very negligible, and thus they've allowed it to be permissible. And Allah knows best.
Rahim, this question has come up a few times. I know you mentioned you have some clients here in Canada who have invested with Curacapital. Are you coming to Canada?
Not anytime soon as a business. You guys are more than welcome to still invest with us. And as I've said, many people do. So I guess that's the punchline. I would love to visit Canada. I do have some family in Canada, and I know I need to visit you guys as well. So yeah, at some point I do need to, inshallah, make the trip over.
I think, bro, your family is like 5 blocks away from here.
Right. Okay. Fantastic.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, question for you here. I think you're trying to solve this problem, Ibrahim. Alhamdulillah, we have many options for shared investments. I feel where Muslims are lacking is wealth creation in the business ownership. Investing generally creates passive income, not wealth. I disagree with that, but I'll let you guys want to take a crack at that.
Yeah, if we think about where you create really serious wealth, it is through entrepreneurship. But only a small minority of people will be entrepreneurs and are even interested in or good at being entrepreneurs. So it probably isn't for the majority of people. However, for those who are interested in it, who want to give it a go, I heavily encourage it, because the more we do have people in that field, the quicker that the collective pot will grow. If we have more Jeff Bezoses that are Muslim, ethical, or Elon Musk's even, that can significantly help our community and also God's cause on earth. With the other aspect, flip side of it, is that actually businesses running in a halal way, they need capital to actually grow. And if you have a dearth of debt capital, and you have a dearth of private equity capital and venture capital, then you're actually going to struggle to grow. And so this is where it's important for investors to make sure that they are investing in those kind of areas that actually allow for the growth of the collective pot.
Alhamdulillah, amazing. I couldn't agree with you more. If you're in a capacity to do a business 100%, nobody can pay you more than what you're worth. I highly encourage business ownership, but business is not for everybody. The rate of failure is probably close to 90%, but the 10% that make it will never look back. And once you do have that passive income from having that business, then investing and putting that money to use is extremely important. The number of businesses I run into just have money sitting in their corporate accounts and checks in cash is unacceptable. Money, you can actually have money inside your business, invested, growing over time, having it available to you as well is important, unless you're using it to expand further and grow. This is actually a great dilemma, Sheikh. Maybe I'll get you to answer this as well. Somebody has the capacity potentially to pay off the conventional mortgage as fast as possible, versus taking those monies right now and investing it. I think it's time value of money. It's a great dilemma. It's also leveraging as well. Which one do I do? If I can borrow it to invest at 8 or 9, that's better financially, but I know there's an Islamic perspective to this as well.
For sure. So the first thing I would mention is making sure that your methodology is correct. Anytime you are about to take an action, make sure that you've sat with your local imam, your local sheikh, to make sure that whatever fatwa you're trying to apply is actually applicable in your situation. So making sure the methodology is correct. If you have done that, then in that sort of situation, you want to make a financial decision. Is the payoff in the stock market going to be greater than the amount of interest that you will be paying in your conventional mortgage? If it is, then financially it seems it is better to invest and pay off your mortgage over the long run. However, if the interest rates are so high that they cannot be offset by the amount of money that you're making through your investments, then it's better to pay off your mortgage quickly. And that is the way I would answer that question. And Allah knows best.
This question, we have answered this multiple times when it comes to zakats on investments. Inshallah ta'ala, we do have a webinar on our website that you can look at. It's asadwal.ca/zakat, where we address zakat calculations on all the different types of accounts that exist in Canada anyways, and the methodology of calculating your zakat properly. But we do have one coming up in Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. If you want to wait for that, we will have a more comprehensive version of zakat calculations and how you do that if you want to come in live. Ibrahim, assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. What differentiates this from a typical riba-based investments that we have here at typical conventional banks in North America? I'm not quite sure what the question follow-up is too, but I'm assuming they're just asking how this actually comes up for me as well. Some people ask like, well, my money is growing, is it riba? Like, I mean, it's not. You're creating wealth, is appreciating by capital gains or dividends, but it's not necessarily the same as interest. I think the confusion is growth is they're confusing growth with interest, which is not.
So I was saying that I think, as you said, it depends on what investment it is, because it will depend, on that in terms of what the answer is. But at the heart of it, you can actually create fixed returns in your investment portfolio that are completely Sharia compliant. And I think the easiest way conceptually to understand that as a Muslim is rental returns. So people sometimes think when you talk about fixed returns that that's somehow un-Islamic, and by the same token, people somehow think that Islamic finance means that it needs to be some kind of charitable endeavor, and there shouldn't be any fees, or the rates of return should be higher, or the fee should be lower. All of these kind of misconceptions. I mean, you're doing like a halal restaurant, right? It's a business, but it happens to be run in a way that is is in line with Sharia.
I'm going to run through some of these questions very fast here, if you guys don't mind. Can Asad Wealth include options for investing Curacapital? Inshallah ta'ala, one day we have to do this. Why not? At this point, it's not available yet, but we can work on that. Question for I invest in Curate. Any possible applications for Canadians here? So number one, to invest into a private equity, you need to have two criteria. One of the two, which is you need to have a net income of $200,000 or more in the past 2 years, or your net worth needs to be over $1 million. So that's a qualification for it. In terms of taxation and stuff like that, you can have investments outside of Canada. That's not an issue whatsoever. Just know any capital gains or any income that you make is taxable back in Canada. So, for example, if Curacapital declares some sort of dividend and you receive that is taxable to you here in this country. They may be withholding taxes in the UK as well, potentially, but that is the tax aspect of it. Please consult an accountant to make sure that you do proper tax due diligence and go from there. Sheikh, this is for you. How are you using insurance as a tool in your financial planning?
I think that's for you, Hash. It's not for me. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not using insurance in financial planning. Khalas. I'm not convinced that the private equity is uncorrelated with public equity. Oh, this is a good one for you.
This is for Ibrahim, yeah.
This is for.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily make the claim that it is completely uncorrelated. I think the claim was that the more investments you have, the more lack of correlation you see. Interestingly enough, and the answer to this actually changes, from year to year. Interestingly enough, we did a video on this, maybe I'd say a year and a half back, and I actually can't remember the answer to that. But I think it threw out basically that there are certain stocks, there are certain investments that are in a statistically significant way uncorrelated to each other, and so it's worth looking at. I mean, if you remember, Hash, what the investment was, then feel free to shout. What I would say is that I think private equity in particular, when you look at it relative to public equities, I would say that there would likely be some kind of correlation because it's ultimately the same asset class. What Where I think it becomes interesting to focus is around the IPO market, because that's the bridge between the two, and seeing how the IPO market is doing, and that will then have a knock-on effect on how we see private market valuation. So I think it's a fair question, it's a fair comment. Final observation I would make is that we actually recently, we're going to launch a video, I think, on tomorrow possibly, where we're going to go into one of the points that is made is how private markets valuation consistently are lower than public markets valuation. So if you think of it as a multiple of EBITDA, the public markets on average you're looking at about 17x EBITDA, and private markets you're looking at somewhere between the 10 to 15x EBITDA. And actually, if you go into micro private equity or micro PE, which is kind of where we play at the moment because we're relatively small, you're actually looking at EBITDA multiples of between 5 and 10. And so the upside that you can gain, and the cheapness of the asset that you get, is actually better. The kind of smaller and the kind of more private you get. The problem, of course, with that is it's kind of less and less liquid, and there's more and more idiosyncratic risk that comes with going further down. So yeah, it's a great question. Hopefully, some useful observation.
I think one thing as well, keep in mind for privates, the evaluations are not done every second. It's done only, quarterly basis, annual basis, and stuff like that. So the change in value is not as dramatic than it is for public equities. I'm not sure if you can answer this question or not, Ibrahim. Curacapital's fees, if you want to avoid, it's fine as well. Inshallah, if it's public or not.
Yeah, it's it's public. The complication is it depends on what investment you go for, so it's not straightforward. But usually it's in the range of somewhere between 0.5 and 2%, depending on basically how involved the investment is. For example, venture and private equity is usually in the 2% range. Real estate and fixed income kind of goes into 0.5 to 1%.
I can take crack at this, Sheikh. You can chime in as well. What would you suggest if someone in their 30s only has $1,000 a month to invest? What would you put that towards it, depending where you are, what part of the country, what part of the world you're in? If you're in Canada, US, highly recommendation to, number one, get a financial plan. I can't stress this out. The biggest friend you have right now is time. Time is your best friend. It becomes your worst enemy every day that goes by, especially in your 30s. Figure out ways that you want and what the goal is or what destination you want to get to. Then allocate $1,000 accordingly to that, those different goals. So if it's retirement, if you want to buy a home, you want to go for Hajj Umrah, you want to buy a car, you want to send your children to school, those are all the important aspects of it. From that point going forward, in terms of investment vehicles, you can individual securities work, you can pick some of the halal ETFs. Ibrahim, I'm sure you know this or not, but we launched one of the only publicly available halal mutual fund in Canada after 20 years of hard work. That could work as well, but there's a lot of different investment vehicles that are available to you. Sheikh, you want to take a look at this?
No, I think your answer is great, man.
Perfect. Alhamdulillah. Okay. We are 1 minute in, so I think we answered most of the questions. And unless you see anything else, Sheikh, you want to take a look at it?
There's a question for you. It says one of the services in Asad Wealth Management is insurance planning. Can you please shed some light on that?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. So we license for insurance, right? We understand what insurance is, how it works, the pros and cons of it. Legally, I'm a financial planner, so I have to give advice on what it is and how it works. We don't actually recommend it. It depends on client and stuff like that. And it's on our website because that's one of the services that we are good at what we do, but not necessarily fit for everybody that we talk to. So yes, it's on our website, it's everywhere. And I understand how it works.
Excellent. And then last question.
Yeah.
Is there an RESP that you recommend in Canada?
RESP itself is a type of investment account. So the RESP itself doesn't really make a difference. It just depends on what you want to do. So, for example, if you're just starting off, brand new, you don't have much money in addition to just the RESP, the recommendation would be setting up what Manzilmi potentially or Wealth Simple if you just want to get started with that. If you do have some wealth to your name and stuff like that, you can reach out to us. We can create for you, a retirement plan, an education plan for your children, and stuff like that. But the RESP contributions are $2,500 a year per child, and you get up to 20% in grants, which is $1,000 per year, approximately.
500.
$5, right?
Yeah.
It's just five on. You can do five. You can go back a year and catch up. But yeah, it's a simple account. Wealth Simple works. Manzil works. If you're just getting started.
Jazakallah khair. I think we're good over there.
Okay. From my side, Jazakallah khairan to both of you. Ibrahim, appreciate your time. I know it's a little bit late for you. It's been absolutely amazing to getting to know you a little bit more and some of the things that you've been up to. And I watch your videos, everyone that comes out. So I think some of the videos even I know more than you do. Alhamdulillah. Sheikh, Jazakallah khairan to you as well on Saturday morning, afternoon here for you. What I usually do, say thank you from my side. Ibrahim, if you want to say salams, and then we'll get our Sheikh to take us out with a beautiful dua.
Inshallah.
So it's been a pleasure. Jazakallah khair, both of you, for organizing. Looking forward to coming to Canada and meeting you guys in person.
Inshallah ta'ala, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair for your time, Ibrahim. Great conversation, wonderful insights. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and increase you in goodness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless Curacapital and allow it to continue to serve the ummah for its financial needs. Allahumma ameen. طيب folks, let's conclude with a dua. اللهم لك الحمد كله ولك الشكر كله وإليك يرجع الأمر كله علانيته وسره فأهل أنت أن تحمد وأهل أنت أن تعبد وأنت على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وعنم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Oh Allah, we ask you by your beautiful names and your lofty attributes that you forgive us for our sins and shortcomings. Oh Allah, make our wealth a proof for us and not a proof against us. Oh Allah, suffice us with the halal and protect us from the haram. Oh Allah, guide us to that which is best for our dunya and our akhirah and save us from the punishment of the hellfire. Oh Allah, bless our rizq for us, make spacious for us our homes, and oh Allah, allow our families to be taken care of after we pass away. Oh Allah, allow us to contribute to the cause of the ummah. Oh Allah, uplift the suffering and the ailments of the ummah. Oh Allah, guide this ummah to that which is beloved to you. Guide us to the book of Allah. Guide us to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and keep us steadfast on them till we meet you, Ya Allah. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khairan to everyone once again for joining us. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.